Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Spiritual Journey podcast. My name is Nimesh Radia, and I'm your host. I always love starting every episode by saying thank you. I feel so blessed with this podcast, with the journey it's taken, with the messages I get on a weekly basis. My objective was, when I started, was to guide people on their journey and to simplify spirituality. And I love that I get to do that. It's definitely a passion project of mine, and I love the impact it's having. It's just the stories I receive every week of, I just found your podcast by chance. And I just love how the universe works and guides people to the podcast. So thank you, everyone that's listening. I am an Akashic record reader, an Akashic trainer, a podcast host, podcast creator, as well as a spiritual coach and mentor. And I love what I get to do. I get to guide people to truly be their authentic selves, to shed the layers, to understand their purpose, to accept their purpose, and to shine their light. I really do feel that planet's going through such a shift, and so many people are being awakened, and I'm here for it. So I'm so blessed with what I get to do. But also with the beauty of this podcast, I get to interview some amazing, amazing guests. I'm excited to have Patricia here with us today. Patricia, I'd love for you, just in your own words, to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much. I too am so grateful to be here. So thank you, and thank you to everyone else. I am an author, also a trauma advocate, and then I'm also a psychedelic guide. So those are the things that I'm most passionate about, and have been working as a trauma-informed coach for several years to help others through really deep and challenging traumatic life experiences.
So thank you for that intro. I always love starting by just asking you, what are you feeling about the current energy? I feel like there's such a shift on the planet, and I feel like it's been planned. Mother Nature, planet, whatever you want to call it. This transition the planet's going through feels like it's been planned for centuries, and the souls that are here have been kind of picked and are meant to be here. So I'm curious, what are you feeling in the energy? What are you hearing from your clients? What do you feel is happening with the planet right now?
Thank you for the question. It's a juicy one right now. So,
I had to ask it.
yeah, we're gonna dive right in. I really feel that we're going through such a massive um, opportunity of ascension, and I think part of that is just absolute chaos and discomfort that we're also seeing. And I think that we really cannot change the aspects um, of ourselves and the collective that are broken until we completely shatter the foundation that they were built on and rebuild anew. And so I think right now, a lot of the shadow in people is getting exposed, the abuse. Part of my mission here on earth is to really expose some of the abuse that's happening within organized religions. And now all of a sudden we're seeing that really happen. And so I'm witnessing a lot with my clients that they're going through extreme levels of discomfort. I would love to hear you share your experience and what you're hearing as well.
Yeah, it's kind of as you say. I mean, for me, the planet and what the planet's going to go through, and over the next 18 months, I feel like as we shift from masculine to feminine, I feel like the masculine's all been about egos, individuals. You talk about religions, but also we put people on pedestals. We put them and I just feel like as we individually kind of go through accepting our ego, I feel like the really strong characters that maybe have been there under, who's to say what's real or false, but I feel like a lot of those individual egos are going to come crashing down, and we're entering into an age of community.
Mm.
And in terms of individuals, I feel like not sure if I want to put it as black and white as two camps, but generally I feel like there's going to be people who focus on the noise on the outside and let that consume them. And the others that will realize that there's so much happening inside them and focus on the healing on the inside. And there's no right or wrong, right? Whatever you choose
Right.
is perfect. And some people, I mean, I guess maybe a little foot on both camps. You know, we are human. But also I feel like there's some of us that have the role of a light worker, you
Mm-hmm.
know, of a bridge to guide people on that bridge, to let them know that there's a choice, to set that example. And we're not
Yeah.
here to force people to change. We're here to guide people.
Yeah. It's interesting because I was scrolling through my Facebook the other day of my friends, and the majority of the connections that I have there are all light workers. And it's amazing how so many people are being awakened into this role. And we are going to need so much support as we move through this. And so it's really inspiring to see. So I deeply acknowledge and appreciate you bringing that into the light. You know, you said something, and I'm wondering if you would speak to it a little bit more, is that, you know, we have a choice to focus on what's the external going on, or we can go into our internal landscape. You know, being a trauma informed coach, I witness a lot the fear and hesitation that people have in going inward, especially those that have experienced adverse childhood experiences or traumatic experiences in their life. Can you speak to that a little bit, and what the invitation is to come inward?
That's a really deep question. The reason it's a really deep question is I feel like so many of us have chosen to heal ancestral karma in this lifetime,
Mm-hmm.
which is why, you know, kind of a lot of people have experienced deep childhood, whatever you want to call it, but religious, the programming that comes from that control. But I feel like so many of us are here to break that mold. But it's hard because our soul has made these decisions for us in terms of what are we here to release, ancestral karma, what are we here to release personally. And sometimes it's consuming, right? And we go through this phase of being consumed. But I do feel like there's a mass collective opening
Yeah.
where the veil of amnesia, where we try to understand why we pick the choices, is becoming thinner.
Yeah.
And the programming that, you know, we've all been under for centuries really is starting to crumble.
Mm.
And what I mean by a choice is, you know, the reality is that sometimes our pain, our trauma consumes us. And we go through a phase. It's like grief, right? It's that we go through the phases, and the individual choice I feel that we have is, if we meet the universe halfway, if we start to ask, change our question to understand why we picked the choice that we did. I always look at healing as in stages. Awareness is always the first stage.
Mhm.
And how do you become aware? You start, you know, kind of working with people like you, and kind of, but being open to the universe supporting you with sending you the right people, but also start to change your question. It's just, if you keep your questions, why does this keep happening to me? Then your guide's going to be like, okay, you want this to keep happening to you.
Mhm.
Whereas if you change and say, okay, what am I here to learn? Because the way I look at it is, I'm always going to be a student. I'm always going to be learning. I'm always going to be expanding. And whatever the universe throws at me, whatever my guides throw at me, it is to expand me. It's
Yeah.
hard sometimes, right? When you're going through some tough things, you know, it's like, you know, I've had many conversations with my soul, with source, you know, and just, yeah, well, I won't swear right now, but what the heck, right? What were you
Yeah.
thinking? Why did we pick this? You
Yeah.
know, just, and that's okay.
Yeah. So you
So that's
touched
a
on
long answer.
yeah,
That's
you
a long
touched
answer
on
to a simple
something
question.
really
Yeah.
you touched on something so important though, and I would love to open a conversation around that.
Sure.
And you shared, you know, the way that I heard you was that sometimes we become in this healing kind of cycle where we're perpetually healing past traumas. And so, can you speak to that a little bit? I have my ideas on it as well of we can almost become addicted to the healing journey, and how do we transform out of our healing crisis into living. I'll just share with some of the listeners that I recently had the opportunity of doing a reading with you, which was incredibly powerful. And one of the things that came up in that is to have more joy. You can do this work that feels hard and heavy, but you can also do it with, laughter and lightness and joy and levity. And so, can you speak to what is the bridge between going through your healing crisis and then moving to the other side of it, of actually being aligned in your work and your purpose, and not being burdened, so to speak, by the heaviness of what's happened to you?
It's interesting, right? The heaviness is, we are here to release heavy energy, right? It's just, but the shift from awareness to acceptance is where the shift really happens. In many ways, for me, the awareness is a little easier because you start changing your question, you start really kind of looking inwards. All of a sudden, your awareness increases. It's like opening a door. Once you open the door to awareness and you start to understand that actually some of the things you went through was part of your journey, was part of what you're here to experience. It is what partly you chose as a soul to heal ancestrally. So all of a sudden you start to become aware. And for a little while, that's enough, right? Look, how cool am I? I'm so aware, I know why I'm going through things. And sometimes it becomes addictive, right? You stay in that space but eventually it becomes frustrating because you're staying in that spot of awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And the next phase is to accept, and that for me is harder because awareness happens when you open that door, and it can be happen really quick, but you can't shut that door. You can't all of a sudden
Mm-hmm.
not be aware of why you're doing certain things. But acceptance is the challenge. Acceptance is really choosing to do the work.
Yeah.
Acceptance is to accept that you chose this path. Acceptance is not judging yourself there, because what do we do when we become aware? Oh, I can't believe I've been doing this for 10 years. Or, and you start judging yourself. No, you have to accept this version of you.
Yeah.
The challenge with this phase is we're asking people to accept a new version of themselves as you go through rebirth. Before you can accept a new version, you have to love this version of you. Because this version of you is brought you to who you are today as a human, as a soul. And it's like if you've been through so much trauma, and when you go through the stages of trauma and the blame that you put through, you start to, and it is hard. But then the next stage is acceptance and accepting who you are. And the third stage is always love. This is where you fall in love with you. And, I love how actually this podcast, you're asking me loads of questions. It's kind of like weird. I'm not used to it.
Everyone
But
says that. I thought I was supposed to be interviewing you, but I think that I love the balance of really like understanding so much deeper. And so I love to get other people's point of view. So when I have the captive audience, I love
beautiful.
to inquire a little bit more.
I've
It's
enjoyed it.
interesting, in my path. I experienced tremendous abuse in my childhood, and I'm crystal clear that I lived through it to do the work that I'm doing now and to really support others on that journey. And, I found that for years I was kind of guilty for being perpetually in the awareness phase versus moving into the acceptance. And I had a really powerful experience just recently where I didn't realize that I was still conflicted about some of my childhood experiences that involved some of my family, of really just finally saying, I accept that this happened to me. And if I don't fully accept that this is part of my, as I call it, spiritual curriculum that I had to live through, then I'm living in the past, actually, right? And in that duality of these two states of consciousness. And that radical acceptance, I think something that we don't often talk about, for me, it came with a tremendous amount of grief that I couldn't even access, and grief that was being masked by anger. And so I think that you've touched on such a powerful I didn't really have the eloquence and language that you had around it of really bridging those two worlds of the awareness and then moving into acceptance. Um, I think it's, that element of self-love too, to really fully love yourself right here today as you are. And I often have a lot of my clients ask, well, what does that even mean? What does it mean to
Yeah,
love yourself? You know, how do you do that?
it's hard. I mean, it's I mean, you just said so much, and there's so much that kind of came up that I want to share. It's first thing we pick. Sometimes trauma is caused by a blood family, and the difficulty is our expectations of what we should get from our blood family.
Hmm.
Our programming says that we should get love from our parents or siblings, but ultimately you picked your blood family to expand you in some kind of way,
Mm.
and that's difficult when it involves trauma, right? And it's just, but acceptance and radical acceptance doesn't mean that you need to keep people in your life.
Mm.
Radical acceptance means accepting this is the path that you picked, but you still get to choose when the soul contract's done. You still get to choose when who's in your world and who isn't in your world. And acceptance isn't acceptance is about accepting the journey you've been through. Doesn't mean you have to accept people to stay in your life. That's still a
Yeah.
choice.
Yeah.
The other thing I really believe, I was saying earlier that I feel like the souls that are here now are meant to be here, and they're meant to be here because we're meant to break the mold, right? Break the mold
Mm.
of, and I feel like when we go through things, we go through them for three reasons. One is to release the karma that we chose to release in this lifetime, whether it's
Hmm.
personal or ancestral.
Yeah.
Second is what our soul chose to experience. So, it's the karma we need to release. Our soul needs to expand. And I really feel that those two things are almost like our training for whatever's coming next.
Hmm.
Like, I'd love to hear more about your story, because you're a great example of everything you've been through has brought you to who you are today. And it's kind of how you're shining your light.
Yeah.
And I applaud you for it. But I'd love for you to share more about your journey and kind of what brings you to this spiritual being that you are today, the shining your light.
Ah, thank you. It's kind of a wild story. I'll try to shorten it. But I was a baby of 9 children, grew up in a Mormon faith and household. And at the age of 16, I became pregnant. And I went to go have an abortion and had told one friend in school, and she had called my parents and said she's going to go have an abortion. And my parents took me to the bishop of the church, and he said, there's a place where we send girls like you. So they shipped me to an all girls school out of state at 16 and pregnant. And when it was time to give back birth to my son, I begged and pleaded, and my parents finally acquiesced, and I moved home to actually give birth. And I was so small at the time that I had a lot of challenging complications with his delivery. And when I came out of having given birth and had to go into some emergency surgery, there was a family there holding my child. And my parents just said, this family is going to go ahead and adopt your son now. And you can imagine, being a mother who had just given birth, how traumatic that experience is. And so, through a beautiful kind of myriad of instances, the nurse took my son, placed him back in my arms. And when he was 9 months old, the bishop of the church came to me again and said, I'd really like to meet with you. And he said, I've had a vision from God, and God has told me that this child isn't meant to be with you. And so at that time, I ended up kind of losing my son through that influence. I believed him, if God has spoken, then clearly this is what's meant to be. And he ended up being adopted out. And fast forward to when he turned 18, he showed up on my door. And when he came back to live with me, it cracked open a tremendous amount of abuse that I had disassociated from, of sexual, physical, and emotional trauma in my family of origin. And I kind of found myself on my knees, like, hey, God, I don't know if you're there, but I need some help here. I don't really know how to navigate this. And long story short, through those confluence of events, I found my path of really studying, went back to school studying spiritual psychology, and worked with a myriad of teachers around the world. And I knew within a short amount of time that I had lived through this for a sole purpose. I was fortunate enough that my soul actually knew that, and I wasn't searching for that. I just didn't know in what way I would bring that to the world. And, it's often, I recently just finished writing my memoir, and I collaborated with a writer on it. And he said, do you ever wish that you hadn't lived through this tremendous amount of pain and abuse? And I went, there isn't an ounce of it that I would have traded, because it's made me who I am today. I mean, the depth in which I can hold and support my clients it's an incredible gift. In the way that I can see and use my intuition is just, it's so sacred to me, what I've lived through.
Wow. And that's what radical acceptance looks like, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's that, you've been through so much and you've shared a little bit, and it's in it. No one would blame you if you're still being angry, right? Just,
Yeah.
it's just, but it's that, radical acceptance that you've been through that so you can guide others through it.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a beautiful thing to accept, but it's also hard to do. So congratulations. Well done
Thank you.
but I'm sure that's not where your spiritual journey ends, right? In terms of what you've been through. And so, the spiritual being you are today, I've managed to connect to your guides, as we talked about earlier, and you have a clear mission on this planet. And I feel like the things that you've been through has brought you to this point. Is there anything more that you want to share about your journey that kind of has led you to be the spiritual being you are today?
Yeah, I think that, you know, a misconception that I thought is, oh, you're going to go through this, have this healing experience, and then all of a sudden you're going to be enlightened and you're not going to have to go through hardships anymore. I mean, I really did think that. It's like, oh, I'm going to get to this point and then I'm not going to um, suffer. And then in 2017, I lost a sister to a fentanyl overdose. And then in 2023, lost a sister to suicide, and life continues. And one of the ways and one of the spiritual teachings that has really stayed with me is, um, you know, it's how we relate to these life experiences that is the issue. That's the issue, not the life experience that happened. Meaning, I have choice in how I want to relate to these traumatic experiences. I can either be a victim to what's happened to me, or I can take this to influence and refine my light within to then be of service in the world. And even though I wasn't able to raise children of my own, I now have an orphanage in Africa where I'm supporting 150 children. And like, the universe works in such mysterious and
That's
magical
so
ways,
beautiful.
right?
Yeah, so beautiful.
And so I think it's like, I've always been curious and stayed open. When life gets hard and challenging, I know that it's happening for a greater purpose. I just have to be strong enough to weather the storm to get to um, really understand why I'm having to go through another life lesson.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. It's like when you hear a lot of stories and how, for me, I believe a spiritual awakening is kind of a lifetime thing. It's not a one-time thing, but
Mm-hmm.
our spiritual jolts, especially more recent, and I feel like over maybe the six years we've started a new cycle, but I feel like those majorly traumatic events, certainly when we lose people, is somehow connected to our spiritual journey and our spiritual awakening. And I know for me, for example, I lost my mentor, my friend who was guiding me. She's aged only 30 years old. She passed away in a fire in March 2020. And that, for me, she's now one of my spiritual guides, but it led me to really understand that I've been playing safe.
Mm.
And it's just, and my dad left this realm 30 years ago, and I didn't realize at the time, but that, do you know what I mean? It's like when I go back and I look at when I lost people from this realm, that in some way was meant to be.
Mm.
And it's just interesting when you start looking at your most painful experiences, some of them can lead to your biggest growth.
Yeah, absolutely. I have two powerful sisters on the other side that help support my angel wings, so I'm all about it, I mean, the work doesn't stop once you transition to the other side, and I feel their power and their presence with my decisions and to champion my work and purpose in this lifetime. Um, to have souls transition where on the earthly plane, many feel like it's too early. And I always feel like it's right on time. And we can access that other realm to actually still be in communication with them.
Yeah. And like I said, Sidra is one of my guides now, and my dad is also one of my guides, and 100%, there's so much support on the other side. I do have to say, sometimes I have a conversation with Sidra. I was like, hold on, Sidra, why did we make this choice? You're on that side, I'm on this side, maybe we could have done it differently, but anyway, it's all good.
Yeah.
My choice, I guess, at some level, right? My soul pick.
Yeah.
So what would your advice be to somebody that is still in the stage of feeling the trauma,
Mm.
kind of wanting to really understand? I'm very careful with my words because sometimes I know I trigger people when I say your soul chose this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when I say things like, everything in your external world is a result of something in your internal world, and whatever happens to you is happening for you. Those are all words that are easy for me to say, right? Just,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
but it's just, if you're in that space and you're going through something, and there's somebody on a podcast that says that the things that are happening to me, right, are happening for me. It's like, well, no, they can't be.
Mm-hmm.
What would your advice be to somebody who's going through that level of trauma? What would you advise them to do and be?
I think that I do believe that healing is possible. And I think that there's times I can even attest when I was going through some of my darkest hours, and I thought, I don't know that my physical body can weather the amount of pain that I'm in. And I can only imagine my sister got to that point before she took her own life. And so the advice that I really would share is that healing is possible if we stay connected to the path of doing the work. And oftentimes people say, well, what does doing the work actually mean? What does that mean? And for me, I've always been a firm believer that when the student is ready, the teacher appears.
Yeah.
And the teacher can be different for everyone, right? It could be a book, a yoga class, a friend, a walk in the woods, whatever it might be. So long as you're staying connected to what I call the divine, or the universe. And I know 1000% that I am protected and I am always being divinely guided. And to know that your soul is going through this for your own kind of ascension or up leveling. And like you said, it's so hard to hear that. And there's been many moments where I've had life experiences where I'm like, you must be kidding. Like, how are we back here again? Didn't we get over this hurdle, right? And then I think
Yeah.
one of the most powerful aspects of it is that the things that we live through are um, it's the very essence of what we go on to teach,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
And that's the beauty of it. And a lot of people talk about repeat cycles. I don't actually believe in repeat cycles. I believe that it's just a different level of healing. So it may feel like the same thing,
Mm-hmm.
but the healing comes back because there's just a different layer of healing that we weren't ready to do earlier, and now we're ready to do now. And just it is really interesting in terms of when you take a step back. And I always advise people, it's like sometimes on the healing journey, we're waiting for some big epiphany, right? We're waiting for this big flash in the sky where all of a sudden we start to understand everything. We understand our purpose, our gifts. And it doesn't always come that way. I feel we always have to meet the universe halfway, right? So our self-care routine, our time in nature, our time in meditation, and even doing one thing small. Because this is the thing, when you're in that when you're in a space where you feel like the whole world is against you, and there's somebody that comes on and say, do all this self-care, people are like, it's not practical.
Yeah.
But maybe pick one thing. Because when you pick one thing for you, what you're doing is you're signaling to the universe that you're important. And I really believe the universe wants to show off for us. But sometimes we need to meet the universe halfway, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's one thing that I really work with my clients on is, what is your spiritual practice? How are you showing up for this co-creation and concert with the universe? I'm curious from you what your belief is around life purpose. I find this insatiable quest from everyone of, I've got to find my purpose. I've got to find my purpose. And the search for finding their big, bang and to understand this huge, divine life, prescription, so to speak. What is your view on that? And how can people be in this new age of everyone talking about life purpose? Like, what does life purpose mean to you?
I'd love to get your answer before I answer. Depending
Okay,
on you a
fair
little
enough.
bit. I mean, it's a conversation. I mean, it's a question I get asked a lot. So I'm just curious, what's your perspective?
Uh, it's interesting. I recently had the opportunity of meeting Elizabeth Gilbert, who wrote Eat, Pray, Love, if you're familiar with that.
Nice. Yeah.
And she touched on this a little bit, and she had such a wonderful kind of response to it. And she was traveling, if I remember the story correctly, if anyone else heard it, forgive me if I get the details off a little bit,
It's
but
all
she
good.
was traveling in Europe and she was walking down the street and she witnessed a man up on a ladder painting the eave of a roof, and she noticed that the ladder was quite rickety and unstable. And so she just stopped and kind of leaned against the ladder to give it some stability. The gentleman never saw her, and she walked away without him ever knowing. And she said, I kind of look at life purposes as simple as that. It's showing up for the experience in every moment of every day. It doesn't have to be that now all of a sudden you're an influencer or author or whatever the thing might be. It's really being fully present to your life and the little moments. And for me, I was like, that's it,
I
that's
love
all
it.
it is.
I
Yeah.
love it. And, one of my favorite phrases, it's not about the breath you take, it's about the moments that take your breath away, right? And that
Uh,
I just, and I smile when, people get stressed out. I don't know what my destiny is. I don't know what my purpose is. And, when I find my purpose, then I'm going to start living. It's like,
mhm,
you're a soul having a human experience. You can't wait to live. The whole point is to have the human experience. So, and the other thing I'll always ask people is, why do you feel that you want to limit yourself to one purpose? Why would
mm,
you do that?
mm,
And I mean, I agree with the example you gave. I'll always say that my purpose is anyone I connect with, I want to leave them better than I found them.
mm. Yeah.
And that just leaves it so open. It means that I can do podcasting, I can do mentoring, I can do group work, I can do whatever I want. And my intention is, at least with one person every day, I'm going to impact their life. And that could be just somebody who listens to the podcast. It's just, but it's like, I would say your purpose is going to evolve. It's going to change. What you're here to do is going to change as you live your life. And the way you describe it is so beautiful. Your purpose is to live in this present moment.
Mhm.
Because let's be honest, look at the last few years. How much control have we really had? How much, who could have predicted that in March 2020, we're all going to go in lockdown? For me, it was Mother Nature sending us all to the naughty corner. Everyone's saying, we haven't got time to heal. We haven't got time to heal. Mother Nature's like, okay, all right, I'm gonna give you time to heal.
Yeah.
And yeah, there was a lot of people that left this realm during that time, and I feel like it was a kind of a purge and energetic, and a lot of people chose as soul to leave. But we can't really control the future. Let's be honest. There's so many things shifting, so many unusual things happening. The only thing we can control is this moment
Mm-hmm.
and the magic and the beauty in this moment. If we can appreciate the magic in this moment, then the next moment becomes even better. And the next, and that's really the control we have. So why do you want to limit yourself to one purpose? Why don't you choose to live in this moment?
Yeah.
And stop waiting to live?
Mm-hmm.
Because,
Exactly.
back in the day, how often would we say, you know what, I'll be happy when I earn this amount of money, or when I get this house, or when I get married, when I have kids? All these stories we used to tell ourselves. And
Mm-hmm.
that's part of the programming, right? That's part of what we're here to break, because we're not all meant to live that program life.
Yeah.
So that's a
I
long
love
answer
that.
to a short question.
Yeah. I love that you brought up COVID because I had a lot of people around me that had extreme fear with COVID, and I don't want to undermine their
Yep.
experience and their fear around that. And for me to just witness this opportunity, it was like everyone got grounded for a while, and got sent to their corners, and everyone's in timeout. And to see, I was busier than I've ever been in my life during COVID from a therapeutic perspective, because it was astonishing to me how many couples had not spent time together, and really having to do their interpersonal work. And why am I with this person? And how many divorces happened during COVID? I mean, there was a tremendous amount of souls leaving this earth, but then there was a lot of divorces as well. And to kind of see that crisis, and I think it brings up for me the importance of how much do you enjoy your own company, and then to share that in the presence of others. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly. When you were talking about marriages, I was actually, I was also thinking about the individual, right? It's that, and it's a good question to ask now, right? It's that, how do you feel about your own company?
Mm. I love being
Because
alone.
actually, and so do I. I love my own company. It's just,
Yeah.
but it's a
I
good
mean,
question to ask, because if
yeah.
you're not comfortable in your own company, that means there's something inside you that's ready to heal, and somewhere you're escaping from it, right? So it's just came up. It's a good question to ask our listeners.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's probably been the hardest aspect of my current relationship, because I love my alone time so much. I can really ground and channel, and I witnessed that his desire for closeness to soothe that, abandonment wound, right? And for me, it's like I feel very expansive when I can spend time alone, especially in nature as well. Um, and I think it's really rare. I have a lot of girlfriends that pack their schedules every single night. They can't be alone. They've got to, make sure they're always on the go. And I do think it's a reflection of the inner landscape. How busy can someone absolutely make their lives be to avoid the quiet?
Yeah, and it is, for me, the magic, as you say, is in the quiet, and
Mhm.
everyone has to have their own path. And it's just, relationships is an interesting dynamic. It's the old paradigm would have been, I need somebody to complete me.
Mhm.
We're complete as we are. It's just, anything external is a bonus, right? And it's just, I feel like in relationships, balance is really important.
Yeah.
Time together and being comfortable on your own,
Mhm.
I feel, is really important, because if you don't have that balance, then that turns to reliance. And if there isn't balance in a relationship, that's when you start to kind of get some challenges, because
Mhm.
one relies more than the other. And it's just a journey, right? And
Mhm.
it's also, right now, I feel like a lot of cycles are ending, a lot of soul contracts over the last 12 months, but also just as we shift and as we raise our vibration and kind of activate the angelic part of us, we can't force the people around us to do the same.
Yeah.
We can set the example
Mm-hmm.
and we can inspire,
Mm-hmm.
but we can't force.
Yeah. I
Which
think something that I've been working a lot with my clients on in their therapeutic processes is that in relationship, when your frequency starts to change, you either invite your partner to up level and go on the journey with you, or that discord between couples becomes so vast that they no longer are kind of vibing at the same frequency. And it's been now more than ever, I'm seeing it with couples of just this internal conflict of, I don't want to leave my families, but I'm so, my family unit, but I'm so devoted to my spiritual path. I don't know how to be in this dynamic anymore with my partner. And it's so hard because they have the foundation for them is to be devoted to their marriages and their partner and families. And right now it's like that, we're in a shakedown, so to speak.
Yeah, it's just interesting because this is where, I love the phrase pain is inevitable, suffering is optional, right? Because we have soul contracts to experience love, right? We have, kind of, you're meant to meet this person, experience, a level of love, whatever it looks like. But then what if that soul contract is also then with the same person, you're meant to experience pain and separation.
Mm,
And sometimes what suffering looks like is a soul contract coming to an end, you being in a relationship which doesn't hold your space, doesn't allow you to expand, but you decide to stay because it's safe, it's what you're used to.
mhm,
And that's where the suffering comes.
mm,
And I always I'm making it sound easy, right? But really stopping and looking at the people around you and seeing yourself as that Disney princess, Disney prince, the hero, whatever you want to call it, and knowing that the people around you are playing the roles that you asked them to play,
yeah,
and then asking, well, hold on, is that role complete?
yeah,
And that's what I said. I feel like so many people are going through this separation now because we are going through a cycle of completion.
mhm,
And, you know, even in a relationship, if you stay together, then there's probably a new soul contract
mm,
of what you meant to experience in this phase of life because the planet's changing.
mhm,
And the only constant in life is change.
yeah.
And everyone says, I love change. Oh my God, I love change. I'm here for change. We love change if we can control it.
I haven't
If we,
heard anyone say that, by the way.
yeah, well, I mean, a lot of people say, oh, I love change, because
Yeah.
but we only love change when we can see it coming. We know what it's going to look like. When we can't see, and like when lockdown, nobody saw that coming. It's just,
Mhm,
everyone's kind of in denial, right? And it's just like, well, and even the shifts of this year, it's just change is the only constant. And the reason that people are feeling a little worried right now is because people can feel a shift happening.
mhm,
Intuitively, we can feel, but it's making people feel uneasy. And what's happening is the disconnect between the human and the spirit is even more than normal because the spirit knows, soul knows that this is the time we're meant to be. And it's kind of like, okay, I've worked at it. I'm ready. And the human's like, well, hold on. I want to understand it. I want to put it in a box. I want to be able to plan for it. This is not the phase to. So the more that we can talk to the ego, the human, and let the human know that this isn't a time to be worried. This isn't a time to control. This is a time to let go.
yeah. Mm.
How
And
does that
it's,
feel to you?
yeah, I mean, what comes up for me is just getting uncomfortable in the discomfort, right? Or getting comfortable in the discomfort. Um, you know, it's interesting as you're talking. Hopefully, my mother will forgive me, but she called me recently, kind of struggling with something with my father, asking for my, advice. And I just went, Mom, you've done this for 60 plus years now. Like, why are we still asking this question? I mean, it's the same thing. And I think to your point in relationship of I've witnessed so many people stay in their relationships and suffer for years of the suffering, for the fear of stepping out into the unknown. And I'm so grateful that you brought that up because, you know, my reflection to her is, when will you just accept that you chose this? Like, the second that you accept that you chose this, maybe you can stop suffering in
Yeah.
your relationship, right? It's
It's that
like,
acceptance, right? It's that
yeah,
acceptance that you chose this. And,
uh,
you know, but it's a really interesting time. And I really try and be gentle with people and help, kind of understand that everybody's on a unique journey. Who
mhm,
I very rarely try and tell people what to do, because who am I to tell people what to do?
yeah,
I can intuitively guide. But maybe that's your mum's path. Maybe your mum was meant to. This was the ancestral healing that she chose.
absolutely. I do have a question for you though. If
I love
you
it.
were to give, I know you don't want to tell people what to do. What do you think is the most important thing that people can do as we're moving through this global shift in collective consciousness?
And my answer is really simple: is stop looking for the answers outside. I mean, how often when we have a question, the first thing we do is chat GPT or Google?
Mm,
What if we just, obviously, if it's a factual thing, we need to know directions, sure, use, but if you have a question about your journey, you know, maybe you go and get reading or whatever, but the first thing I always recommend is look inside for your answers,
mm,
because you have so much knowledge. And I feel like the shift that we're going through right now is we're meant to break the mold. And if we're meant to break the mold, you're not going to find your answers in your history.
mhm.
You're going to find them from a channel's perspective. So why don't we activate the channel in us and really sit with our own energy, our own guides, and ask the question? And a lot of people may say, well, I don't have guides. Respectfully, we all have guides.
Mm,
It's just we're not receiving the messages that we expect to.
yeah.
But start with your intuition. Because our messages from our intuitive is always, they're always light. They're always, don't shout. Or our ego shouts. Our ego's brass. It's kind of like, start trusting your intuition, and then see where that takes you.
Yeah. I agree.
And what would your advice be? How would you answer that question in terms of, if there's so much stuff happening on the planet, what
Yeah.
would your advice be to people and to find that balance?
Um, I mean, absolutely piggybacking off of what you said, of course. And I think that um, to stay grounded through this, you have to have some form of a spiritual practice, whether it's meditation, breath work, daily journaling, whatever it is, to have something. And I think that there's this misconception that it needs to be hours and hours a day or, you know,
Mm.
structured. It's the little things. And I think most importantly is that daily check in, to just check in with your body. What do you need? What are you lacking? I think people are so on autopilot that they forget to even check in with the vessel that they're, moving around this life in. Um, and so I know, and it's one of the first things to go when we get busy is our spiritual practice, right?
I mean, our physical body is so intuitive. It gives us so many clues.
Hmm.
I couldn't agree more. Honestly, I'm having a very human experience. It's got very dark around me very
I
quickly, and
know.
I'm going to let you talk, and I'm just going to quickly put on the light. It's just like,
Okay, good.
it's so weird. It's just
I
like,
was
wait,
wondering
what do I
that.
do? Do I put it on pause? You know what? Whatever
No.
comes through. So I'm going to let you, just give me 2 seconds while you can talk.
Okay, do it. Turn the lights on. I was witnessing that as well. And what's funny was coming to me when I witnessed kind of the light and the dark was that isn't that the nature of life that we have to be in resonance with both the light and the dark. And when it becomes dark, we can just go turn the light back on, right? I mean, really, that was going through my head as I was
I was just
witnessing all of a sudden it get dark.
Yeah, because I was looking at it, I was thinking, all right, because when I started, it was quite really bright, and it's just got, I guess it is that time of the evening, and I wasn't really, I was in that channel state, but the reality is we all have light and dark, right?
Yeah.
It's just, but
Yeah.
it was just an interesting experience because, like,
Yeah.
well, I could just keep going, and it's on the YouTube. It'll be is what it is, but so
Yeah.
I'd love to know more about what do you do? How in terms of someone who's interested in working with you, what would that look like?
Mm. Yeah. So my path of healing really included I was on the floor of my bedroom one night in deep, deep, deep pain and suffering, and really kind of pleading with the universe to show me a path to healing or to take my life. And what was revealed to me at that time was to explore working with psychedelic medicines. Like, I really needed to get online. When I got the download, I had to get online and start searching for what that meant, right?
Sure.
And so for me personally, being able to work with psychedelic medicines allowed me to expose what had happened earlier on in my childhood. And from that place, it's really challenging to heal that which is not in your conscious awareness. So I needed to bring it to my consciousness so I could start healing it, which was incredible. And so for me, I felt divinely called to work with these indigenous medicines.
Beautiful.
And so working with me, I work with a lot of clients privately, one-on-one. That feels more resonant. I work with a lot of CEOs, and they don't really want others to be exposed to what they're going through on their healing journey.
Sure.
So one-on-one. And I also host retreats in Costa Rica and also in Mexico. So those are two ways. And then if you aren't called to working with psychedelic medicines, I do a lot of trauma-informed coaching. I work with a lot of clients that say, oh, I don't have any trauma in my childhood. And then you start working with them, and it's like, oh, my father was an alcoholic, and my mother and father never spoke to each other, and my father never spoke to me when I got home from school.
It's
And they don't really identify that as a soul injury to a child, right? And so it's kind of my specialty to help meet them at that place and guide that younger part of them back into alignment with their human experience.
Wow, I love it. Psychedelics and healing, I feel like is gonna be an interesting journey. It, I feel there is a connection to open us up when the time is right to channel at a different level.
Yeah.
And certain psychedelics really expand where you are in that moment.
Hmm.
And I'm curious how that journey, and I know that in the US is kind of further ahead than maybe in the other, certainly in the UK, but it's an interesting path that I feel like we're going to go. And the other thing that you reminded me of a story in terms of, childhood trauma. I am also one of nine, actually. So I've got four brothers, four
Oh.
sisters. Isn't that interesting?
Mhm.
And I've got one younger sister. Everyone else is older. And, you know, my background is 3 years old. We were refugees in the UK. We were thrown at Uganda. And so we came to the UK, didn't know the language, didn't have a home. And I was only 3 years old. So, for me, a lot of the trauma I grew up in a loving environment, but didn't really have a voice. Everyone's trying to find their space. Everyone's older, and everyone's kind of so. It's interesting. My voice is my gift now, right? It's just an interesting journey. But the work I did afterwards, because I always thought I was three. So, when we were leaving Uganda at gunpoint, and guns were being held at my brother's head, and all this sort of stuff, I was three. So I just there's no trauma there for me. I don't remember anything. But the work I've done, I realized actually I took on the trauma of others.
Mm.
And it's just they were fearful, and I was three, and for me it was like first time here, first time on a boat, first it's probably a bit of an adventure, but you take on other people's trauma so that their pain and their trauma actually I took on.
Hmm.
And it was a surprise to me because I'd done so much work on myself in terms of when I came to the UK, finding a voice, kind of I'd done a lot of that inner child healing from there, but kind of surprised me when the 3-year-old that had to do all that
Yeah.
also had to deal with trauma.
Yeah.
I just thought of it now because it creeped up on me. It's like, oh, I mean, it sounds obvious now,
Yeah.
but at the time it wasn't. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I agree. There's always some trauma. The inner child has a lot of responsibility for who we are. You know, the child is father to the man, and we've all been through something as a child,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
And it could be as simple as coming home and, one of our parents having a headache and getting annoyed with us. That creates an echo. And sometimes you hold on to that and I love it. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So as we start to close out this episode, I'm curious, what do you want to share with our listeners in terms of wisdom, whatever's in your heart in terms of going through this phase of shining the light, going through resets, rebirths, there's
Mm.
so much shifting happening. What would you advise people?
Hmm. I think that now is the time more than ever to really deepen in our, you know, nutrient dense food. You know, we are who we surround ourselves with. Um, to stay in that loving compassion and to deepen in just sacred acts of self love. I think time in nature to really decompress from all of this. And then I think, more than ever to absolutely trust the process, that there is a divine plan unfolding. And I know that so many people are living in fear right now. And I'm so grateful that I have this inner knowing that everything is going to be okay. And it is happening for our greater good, for as uncomfortable as it may be for some right now. And to just trust in that unfolding, and to also know that there are brilliant teachers and guides and healers doing incredible work. I know even the work that you and I did together, I'm excited to deepen in our work together here in the future. There are guides out there that can support this time, and if you're so willing to go on the journey. Yeah.
Yeah. And as you said earlier, once the student's ready, the teacher will show up, right? And
Mm-hmm.
for me, it's a soul contract.
Yeah.
So ask your guides and trust in your soul. I know I would encourage all our listeners to follow Patricia. You have some exciting things coming up,
I
and
do.
we talked a little bit about it yesterday. I'm curious if you want to share about anything that's coming up for you.
I would, of course. I have a 3-part docuseries coming out, which is exciting, and my memoir, both titled The Church of All Good Things. Um, and then also some retreats coming up, and they can find me at Patricia_Noelle, Noelle_ on social media, or patricianoelle.com.
Beautiful. I will include your links and everything in the show notes. So if you are, I would highly encourage you to follow Patricia, and if her voice resonates, and then reach out to her. Beautiful soul that's here to do beautiful things. So thank you for agreeing to be a guest. I loved our conversation. I'm excited to see what the future holds.
Mm.
And I'm sending so much love and light out. I hope, hopefully our listeners have really felt the love that's coming from us today. There is a lot of shifts happening. And if you could truly allow the universe to support you, feel the love around you, feel the love inside you, maybe that just opens up something in you. So sending everyone so much love and light. And Patricia, I'm going to hand over to you to close us out.
Oh, thank you. My heart is just so full with such deep gratitude, and to remember that as we all move through this, the the wings of the bird are in our deep and resounding gratitude for this life and the opportunity that we get to live it and be a part of it. So thank you so much.
Beautifully said. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sending love and light. Bye for now.